This video contains audio content only. There are no visual elements or images accompanying the audio. If you're expecting to see video footage, please note that this is an intentional audio-only presentation. We recommend listening to this content rather than watching the screen. Thank you for your understanding and enjoy the audio. Welcome to an exploration of one of the most fascinating yet often overlooked aspects of our world, landlocked countries. Imagine being cut off from the ocean, surrounded by other nations on all sides. For most of us living in coastal countries, the idea of never having direct access to the sea might seem strange, even limiting. But for nearly 1/5 of the world's nations, this is their reality. Today, we're going to take you on a journey through these unique nations, from the wealth of Switzerland to the struggles of developing countries in Central Asia and Africa. We'll explore how being landlocked has shaped everything from their economies and food customs to their national psychology and cultural identity. You'll hear surprising stories of innovation, determination, and adaptation that challenge our assumptions about what it means to be cut off from the sea. Did you know that some landlocked countries have navies? Or that one nation managed to gain ocean access by purchasing a tiny strip of land from its neighbor? These are just a few of the fascinating tales we'll uncover. We'll also examine how modern technology and changing global trade patterns are transforming the prospects of landlocked nations in unexpected ways. What makes this topic particularly relevant today is how it intersects with some of the most pressing issues of our time: global trade, economic development, environmental sustainability, and international cooperation. As we face an increasingly interconnected world, understanding the unique challenges and opportunities of landlocked nations becomes more important than ever. Whether you're a student of geography, an enthusiast of international affairs, or simply curious about how different parts of our world function, this exploration will give you a new perspective on global dynamics and human ingenuity. From the highest mountains of Nepal to the vast steppes of Mongolia, from the heart of Europe to the depths of Africa, we'll discover how nations and peoples have adapted to and thrived in their landlocked situations. So join us as we embark on this fascinating journey through the world's landlocked nations, their struggles, their triumphs, and their ongoing evolution in our modern world. Their stories are not just about geographic limitations, they're about human resilience, diplomatic creativity, and the constant drive to overcome natural barriers. 1. The unique challenges, economic and cultural impacts of being landlocked. Think about the last time you ordered something online from another country. For most coastal nations, that package likely traveled across the ocean and arrived at a nearby port. But for landlocked countries, every international shipment becomes an intricate dance of cross-border negotiations and multiple transit points. This reality creates what experts call the landlocked premium, where countries without direct sea access pay up to double the transportation costs of their coastal neighbors. Take Ethiopia, Africa's most populous landlocked nation. When the country lost its coastal access after Eritrea's independence in 1993, it didn't just lose beaches, it lost its entire navy. The Ethiopian Navy, once a proud force patrolling the Red Sea, found itself in the unusual position of being a naval force without an ocean. The ships were eventually sold, and naval personnel had to be reassigned. Today, Ethiopia pays hundreds of millions of dollars annually just to use ports in neighboring Djibouti. But the challenges go beyond simple logistics. In Zambia, a country rich in copper deposits, miners face a peculiar problem. To export their copper to global markets, they must transport it through multiple countries, each with its own regulations, checkpoints, and potential for delays. A journey that might take days in a coastal country can stretch into weeks. During the rainy season, when roads become impassable, entire shipments can be delayed, causing significant economic ripples through the country's economy. The impact on daily life can be surprising. In the Czech Republic, despite being one of Europe's most developed landlocked nations, the price of bananas can be up to 30% higher than in neighboring Germany, simply due to transportation costs. This banana effect extends to countless other imported goods, from coffee to electronics, affecting everything from grocery bills to business operations. The human cost of these challenges can be even more profound. In Bolivia, which lost its coastline to Chile in the War of the Pacific, 1879 to 1884, the loss of sea access remains such an emotional national wound that the country maintains a navy and celebrates an annual Day of the Sea, Dia del Mar. Every March 23rd, Bolivians gather to remember their lost coastline, with schoolchildren singing songs about the Pacific Ocean they've never seen. The Bolivian Navy, which now operates on Lake Titicaca and various rivers, continues to train as if it might one day return to the sea. These challenges have led to some creative solutions. Mongolia, despite being landlocked, has created a ship registry, effectively becoming a flag of convenience for international vessels. A creative way to participate in global maritime commerce without having a coastline. Meanwhile, Botswana turned its landlocked status into an advantage by focusing on high-value, low-weight exports like diamonds, which can be transported by air, effectively bypassing the need for sea access. Perhaps one of the most striking examples comes from Burkina Faso, where entrepreneurs have developed sophisticated supply chain networks that combine traditional camel caravans with modern GPS tracking to ensure goods reach their destination. These digital caravans represent a unique blend of ancient trading methods and modern technology, showcasing how landlocked nations adapt to their geographical constraints. The impact on national psychology can't be understated. Researchers have noted what they call the landlocked mindset, a combination of resourcefulness and frustration that shapes national policy and cultural attitudes. In Paraguay, this manifests in a strong emphasis on regional cooperation and the development of river transport networks. The Paraguay-Parana waterway has become so crucial that it's often called the highway of water, serving as a lifeline for the country's economy. 2. The surprise success stories. Wealthy landlocked nations like Switzerland. When we think of wealthy nations, our minds often drift to coastal powerhouses like the United States, Japan, or Singapore. Yet some of the world's most prosperous countries have no coastline at all. Switzerland stands as perhaps the most remarkable example of this paradox, having transformed its landlocked status from a potential liability into a strategic advantage. Consider this surprising fact. Switzerland's GDP per capita consistently ranks among the world's highest, surpassing many maritime nations. But how did a country with no direct access to the sea, surrounded by mountains, achieve such prosperity? The Swiss story begins with a deliberate strategy developed centuries ago. Unable to rely on sea trade, Switzerland focused on developing high-value, low-bulk products that could be easily transported overland. This gave birth to their renowned watchmaking industry, with brands like Rolex and Patek Philippe becoming global symbols of luxury. But Switzerland isn't alone. Austria, another landlocked success story, transformed Vienna from the capital of a once mighty maritime empire into a modern hub of innovation and culture. After losing its coastal territories following World War I, Austria pivoted to become a leader in specialized manufacturing and tourism. Today, despite having no coastline, Austria maintains one of Europe's highest standards of living. Luxembourg, though tiny and landlocked, has become a global financial powerhouse. With a population smaller than many cities, it hosts more than 130 international banks and manages assets worth trillions of euros. The country turned its Central European location into an advantage, positioning itself as a crucial crossroads for international finance. Perhaps the most remarkable transformation comes from Liechtenstein, one of only two doubly landlocked countries in the world, meaning it's surrounded entirely by other landlocked countries. Despite this seemingly impossible geographic situation, Liechtenstein has become a global leader in specialized manufacturing, particularly in high-tech dental products. The country's dental companies supply about 60% of the world's artificial teeth, proving that with the right strategy, even the most geographically constrained nation can find its niche. These success stories share common themes. Unable to rely on traditional maritime trade, these nations developed what economists call the specialized service economy model. They focused on high-value services and products that don't require massive shipping infrastructure. For example, Andorra, another landlocked microstate, transformed itself into a tax-free shopping haven and ski resort destination, attracting millions of tourists annually. The human side of these success stories is equally fascinating. In Zug, Switzerland, a small landlocked canton has become known as Crypto Valley, a global hub for cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. Local residents tell stories of running into Bitcoin millionaires at local coffee shops, while traditional Swiss bankers adapt to the new digital economy. This transformation happened precisely because the canton needed to find alternative ways to generate wealth without access to traditional trade routes. These nations also invested heavily in education and innovation. The Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, Zurich, has produced numerous Nobel laureates and pioneered breakthroughs in fields from quantum computing to climate science. This focus on human capital rather than natural resources or maritime trade has proven remarkably successful. The story of how these landlocked nations achieved such success offers valuable lessons for developing countries facing similar geographic constraints. They demonstrate that being landlocked doesn't have to mean being locked out of global prosperity. It's about finding creative ways to turn geographic limitations into unique opportunities. 3. The race to the sea, historical struggles and creative solutions. Throughout history, landlocked nations have engaged in fascinating and sometimes bizarre attempts to gain access to the ocean. These efforts range from military campaigns to clever diplomatic maneuvers, and even include attempts to create artificial waterways across entire continents. One of the most remarkable stories comes from Ethiopia's persistent quest for sea access. In the 1960s, Emperor Haile Selassie attempted to negotiate the purchase of the entire French territory of Djibouti. When this failed, Ethiopia tried to establish a naval base in Venus, Vietnam, nearly 5,000 miles away from its borders. Though these attempts proved unsuccessful, they demonstrate the lengths to which landlocked nations will go to secure maritime access. Bolivia's struggle for sea access provides an even more dramatic narrative. After losing its coastline to Chile in the War of the Pacific, Bolivia has tried everything from international lawsuits to proposed land swaps. In one particularly creative attempt in the 1970s, Bolivia offered Chile a large portion of its freshwater resources in exchange for a narrow corridor to the Pacific. The proposal, known as the Corridor of Cariña, came tantalizingly close to reality before ultimately falling through due to Peru's objection, highlighting the complex diplomatic dance required when three nations must agree on territorial changes. But some countries have found success through unconventional means. Moldova, for instance, gained limited access to the Black Sea through a clever real estate deal. In 2005, Moldova acquired a 600-meter strip of land along the Danube River from Ukraine, allowing it to build a small port. This tiny piece of land, barely larger than a few football fields, transformed Moldova's economic prospects by providing direct maritime access, albeit on a small scale. Perhaps the most successful example of creative problem-solving comes from the Republic of Ragusa, modern-day Dubrovnik, Croatia. In 1699, Ragusa deliberately gave a small strip of its coastline to the Ottoman Empire, creating what is now the Neum Corridor in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Why would a coastal nation voluntarily become landlocked? The strategy was brilliant. By creating this buffer zone, Ragusa prevented its powerful neighbor Venice from sharing a border with it, effectively using its landlocked status as a defensive measure. The quest for sea access has also led to some unusual military developments. Paraguay, despite being landlocked, maintains one of South America's largest river warfare capabilities. Its navy operates more riverine vessels than many coastal nations, effectively turning its extensive river network into a maritime highway. During the Paraguay-Bolivia War, 1932–1935, Paraguay even managed to capture several Bolivian gunboats, adding them to its own fleet, creating the unusual situation of one landlocked nation seizing the navy of another landlocked nation. Modern times have seen equally creative approaches. Uzbekistan, doubly landlocked in Central Asia, has developed what it calls dry ports, massive logistics centers that function like seaports but for land-based trade. These facilities process containers and cargo as if they were maritime ports, complete with customs facilities and international trade zones. The largest of these, in Navoy, even has its own airline to facilitate air freight connections, effectively creating an airport to complement its dry port functions. Kazakhstan's approach has been particularly innovative. Unable to access the world's oceans directly, it has invested heavily in the Caspian Sea, developing a sophisticated fleet of ice-capable vessels that can operate year-round. More impressively, Kazakhstan has worked with China to develop a transcontinental dry canal, a network of railways and highways that functions like a maritime canal, complete with scheduled sailings, train departures, and ports, logistics hubs. 4. The Great Lake Alternative. How landlocked nations create beach culture. In one of the most fascinating adaptations to landlocked life, many countries have developed vibrant, beach cultures around their lakes and rivers, creating experiences that sometimes rival or even surpass traditional coastal destinations. This phenomenon reveals how humans can adapt and create thriving leisure cultures despite geographic limitations. Hungary offers perhaps the most striking example with Lake Balaton, often called the Hungarian Sea. This massive freshwater lake has become such an integral part of Hungarian culture that it's practically a national symbol. During the Cold War, it was known as the meeting point of East and West, where families separated by the Iron Curtain could reunite on its shores. Today, the lake hosts international sailing competitions, and its shoreline features everything from century-old spa towns to modern music festivals that attract hundreds of thousands of visitors. In landlocked Macedonia, Lake Ohrid has developed its own unique beach culture dating back thousands of years. The lake's shores are home to beaches that could easily be mistaken for Mediterranean coastlines, complete with beach bars, water sports, and a distinct cultural atmosphere. Local legends speak of a mysterious underwater city, and archaeologists have indeed found remnants of prehistoric settlements beneath its waters. The lake's beach towns have developed their own distinct dialect, mixing words from multiple languages to create a unique lake culture vocabulary. Switzerland's lake culture takes a different approach, focusing on urban beaches and sophisticated lakeside promenades. In Zurich, the famous Badi culture centers around historic bathhouses converted into trendy beach clubs. These facilities, some dating back to the 1880s, feature Art Nouveau architecture and maintain strict traditions, including separate swimming times for men and women in some locations, a practice that continues from Victorian times. But perhaps the most remarkable example comes from Mongolia, where the Gobi Desert meets beach culture at Lake Koskol, known as the Blue Pearl of Mongolia. Here, traditional nomadic culture blends with beach tourism in unexpected ways. Visitors can stay in gurs, traditional nomadic tents, right on the lakeshore, and local entrepreneurs have developed unique activities like beach horseback riding and camel sunset tours along the shoreline. In winter, the lake becomes the world's largest natural ice skating rink, with locals creating elaborate ice festivals. The story of Uganda's Lake Victoria beaches reveals another fascinating adaptation. Unable to access ocean surfing, local youth have developed lake surfing, taking advantage of the unique wave patterns created by tropical storms over Africa's largest lake. A whole culture has emerged around this practice, with local surfboard makers using traditional boat building techniques to create boards specially designed for lake conditions. Kazakhstan's response to being landlocked is particularly innovative. The country has built an indoor beach resort called the Khan Shatter, complete with real sand imported from the Maldives and a climate-controlled environment that maintains summer temperatures year-round, even when outside temperatures drop to -40 degrees Celsius. The facility creates artificial waves and uses special lighting to simulate sunsets, providing a beach experience in the heart of Central Asia. Paraguay's Encarnacion has earned the nickname Pearl of the South for its artificial beach project. The city transformed a stretch of the Parana River into a fully functioning beach resort, complete with imported sand and a sophisticated water quality management system. The project has been so successful that it's changed migration patterns within the country, with many Paraguayans choosing to retire in Encarnacion rather than moving to coastal Uruguay or Brazil. Lake Sevan in Armenia showcases yet another approach to landlocked beach culture. Local entrepreneurs have developed what they call mountain beach tourism, where visitors can swim in high-altitude lakes while surrounded by snow-capped peaks. The contrast between alpine and beach environments has created a unique tourism niche, attracting visitors specifically interested in experiencing this unusual combination. 5. Doubly landlocked. The fascinating case of two countries surrounded by landlocked nations. In the entire world, only two countries hold the distinct position of being doubly landlocked: Uzbekistan and Liechtenstein. This means they're not only landlocked themselves but are completely surrounded by other landlocked countries. It's like being trapped in a geographical Russian doll, where every potential path to the sea must cross at least two international borders. Uzbekistan's situation is particularly intriguing. To reach the nearest seaport, Uzbek goods must traverse either Kazakhstan to reach the Caspian Sea, itself landlocked, then cross through Russia or Iran to reach open waters, or travel through Kyrgyzstan, then China, to reach the Pacific. This complex geography has led to some remarkable adaptations. In the ancient city of Tashkent, for example, the government has established what locals call the dry port of the Silk Road, a massive logistics complex that processes shipping containers as if they were at a seaport, complete with its own customs zone and international trading floor. The human impact of this double landlocked status creates fascinating cultural adaptations. In Uzbek literature and poetry, the sea takes on an almost mythical quality. Many Uzbek children grow up hearing stories about the ocean without ever having seen it. Local artists have even developed a unique genre of desert wave paintings, depicting imagined seascapes based on the undulating patterns of desert sand dunes. Liechtenstein's approach to its double landlocked status offers a striking contrast. Despite being surrounded by other landlocked nations, Austria and Switzerland, Liechtenstein has turned its geographic isolation into an advantage. The country has become a global leader in high-tech manufacturing, focusing on products so valuable relative to their size that transportation costs become negligible. One remarkable example is the country's dental products industry. Liechtenstein's artificial teeth are so renowned that they're used in dental offices worldwide, with the tiny nation supplying a significant percentage of the global market. The story of how these two countries manage international mail provides a fascinating glimpse into the complexities of being doubly landlocked. Uzbekistan has developed what it calls the Desert Express, a network of high-speed trains that connect to multiple neighboring countries' postal systems. Meanwhile, Liechtenstein has no airport and no postal system of its own. It relies entirely on Swiss Post, using Swiss postal codes and stamps, in one of the world's most unique postal arrangements. Both nations have developed extraordinary diplomatic skills out of necessity. Uzbekistan maintains what it calls the Five-Nation Protocol, a complex series of agreements ensuring that goods can reach the sea through multiple routes, preventing any single neighbor from having too much leverage over its trade. Liechtenstein, in contrast, has effectively outsourced many of its international relations to Switzerland through a series of treaties and agreements, while maintaining its sovereignty. The impact on daily life in these nations can be surprising. In Uzbekistan's Fergana Valley, markets have developed a unique pricing system that factors in the double transit premium, the cost of crossing two sets of borders. Local merchants have become expert international negotiators, often speaking 4 or 5 languages to deal with multiple transit countries. Meanwhile, in Liechtenstein, many residents have never seen the sea despite being among the wealthiest people in the world. Instead, they've developed a rich culture around mountain lakes and alpine activities. Perhaps most remarkably, both nations have turned their unusual geographic situation into a source of national pride. Uzbekistan celebrates what it calls Continental Innovation Day, highlighting technological and cultural achievements that have emerged from its landlocked position. Liechtenstein has embraced its status as a curiosity, with tourism campaigns that playfully advertise it as the country so nice, they locked it twice. 6. The transit game. Complex relationships with coastal neighbors. The relationship between landlocked countries and their coastal neighbors often resembles an intricate dance of diplomacy, economics, and sometimes tension. This complex dynamic has led to some of the most fascinating stories in international relations, where access to the sea becomes a powerful bargaining chip in regional politics. Consider the case of Nepal, wedged between India and China. In 2015, Nepal experienced what locals called the Great Blockade, when its access to Indian ports became severely restricted during a period of political tension. The crisis led to severe shortages of fuel and medical supplies, forcing Nepal to sign its first-ever trade agreement with China as an alternative route. This resulted in one of the world's most ambitious infrastructure projects, railways being built through the Himalayas to connect Nepal with Chinese ports, literally drilling through the world's highest mountains to reach the sea. Ethiopia's relationship with Djibouti presents another fascinating case study. Ethiopia pays approximately $1.5 billion annually to use Djibouti's ports, accounting for nearly 95% of its maritime trade. This arrangement has created an unusual symbiotic relationship where Djibouti's economy is heavily dependent on Ethiopian trade, while Ethiopia relies on Djibouti's ports for survival. To cement this relationship, Ethiopia has invested in everything from railways to water pipelines connecting the two countries, essentially treating Djibouti's ports as if they were its own. Sometimes these transit relationships can lead to unexpected innovations. In West Africa, Mali has developed what it calls the port shopping strategy, deliberately maintaining agreements with multiple coastal nations, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Togo, to prevent any single country from gaining too much leverage over its trade. This has led to the development of sophisticated logistics software that calculates the most efficient route based on ever-changing factors like port congestion, political stability, and even seasonal weather patterns. The most creative solution perhaps comes from Paraguay, which has established what it calls maritime territories in foreign ports. In the Brazilian port of Paranagua, Paraguay maintains a dedicated section of the harbor that operates under special rules, almost like a landlocked version of a foreign embassy. Paraguayan customs officials work directly in these foreign ports, creating a unique arrangement where a piece of Brazilian territory effectively functions as Paraguay's window to the sea. The human stories behind these transit relationships are equally compelling. In the border town of Burgan between Nepal and India, an entire economy has developed around transit trade. Locals speak of professional border crossers, who have memorized every detail of customs regulations and develop personal relationships with border officials on both sides. Some families have been in the transit business for generations, with children learning the intricacies of cross-border trade before they learn to read. Mongolia's relationship with China and Russia has led to an unusual profession, the route optimizer. These specialists spend their careers finding the most efficient ways to navigate through two of the world's largest countries to reach seaports. They must consider factors ranging from Russian railway gauge changes to Chinese holiday schedules, creating complex algorithms that save millions in shipping costs. The impact on culture and society can be profound. In Burkina Faso, the need to maintain good relationships with multiple coastal neighbors has influenced everything from language education to marriage patterns. Many families deliberately send their children to study in different coastal countries, creating a network of connections that can be invaluable for future trade relationships. Local businesses often hire employees based on their connections to different transit countries, creating what sociologists call transit diversity in the workplace. 7. Kazakhstan, the world's largest landlocked nation. The story of Kazakhstan, a country larger than Western Europe yet without direct access to the world's oceans, represents perhaps the most ambitious attempt to overcome the challenges of being landlocked. This massive nation, stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Altai Mountains, has developed what it calls the continental ocean strategy, a multi-pronged approach to creating maritime connections despite its landlocked status. Consider the scale of Kazakhstan's challenge. Its territory is so vast that if you placed it over the United States, it would stretch from Chicago to Los Angeles. Yet despite this enormous size, every route to the ocean must pass through at least one other country. This geographic reality has spawned some of the most innovative solutions in modern logistics and international trade. One of Kazakhstan's most ambitious projects is the Korgos Gateway, often called the dry port of the steppes. Located on the Chinese border, this massive facility has essentially created an inland seaport in the middle of the Eurasian continent. The scale is staggering. Cranes designed for maritime ports tower over the desert landscape, lifting shipping containers between Chinese and Kazakhstani railway systems that run on different gauges. Local workers tell stories of waking up to the sound of ship horns, only to remember they're hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean. The horns belong to the massive trains that function as land ships across the Eurasian landmass. The country has also developed what it calls maritime thinking without an ocean. In the city of Aktau on the Caspian Sea, Kazakhstan maintains a sophisticated fleet of ice-capable vessels that can operate year-round, connecting to Russian river systems that eventually reach the Arctic Ocean. The Aktau port has become so significant that local children learn maritime navigation alongside traditional horseback riding, a unique blend of steppe culture and seafaring knowledge. Perhaps most fascinating is Kazakhstan's New Silk Road initiative. The country has positioned itself as a critical link in China's Belt and Road Initiative, creating what some call a land-ocean, a network of railways, highways, and logistics hubs that function like maritime shipping lanes across the continent. This has led to the emergence of entirely new cities, such as Nurkant, purpose-built to service this transcontinental trade network. The human side of Kazakhstan's adaptation to landlocked status is equally compelling. In the capital, Astana, now Nur Sultan, universities offer degrees in continental logistics, a field that didn't exist 2 decades ago. Students learn to calculate complex routes that might involve trains through China, ships across the Caspian, trucks through Russia, and finally vessels on the Black Sea, all to get products to global markets. The country has even developed its own unique terminology for this new type of trade. What maritime nations call ports of call become train cities in Kazakhstan's network. The traditional role of harbor pilots has been replaced by steppe navigators, who guide cargo through the complex web of international borders and changing railway gauges. In the southern city of Shymkent, an entire industry has emerged around what locals call distance optimization, finding ways to make Kazakhstan's geographic position work to its advantage. One success story involves the export of uranium, where Kazakhstan has turned its landlocked status into a security advantage, developing special secure transit routes that are actually safer than maritime shipping. The impact on Kazakh culture has been profound. Traditional nomadic concepts of space and distance have been adapted to modern logistics. The ancient Silk Road caravanserais have been reimagined as modern logistics hubs, and traditional Kazakh music now includes a genre called train songs that tell stories of goods and people moving across the vast steppes. 8. From coast to landlocked. Countries that lost their sea access. Perhaps the most emotionally charged stories in the realm of landlocked nations come from countries that once had coastlines but lost them through war, political upheaval, or the dissolution of larger states. These nations often carry a particular kind of collective trauma, with their lost maritime heritage becoming deeply woven into their national identity. Ethiopia's transformation from a coastal nation to a landlocked one stands as one of the most dramatic examples. When Eritrea gained independence in 1993, Ethiopia suddenly found itself without its Red Sea coastline. The impact was immediate and profound. The Ethiopian Navy, once a proud force with a history dating back to the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie, found itself in an almost surreal situation. For several years, the Navy continued to operate from foreign ports in Yemen and Djibouti, like a maritime force in exile, before finally being dissolved in 1996. Today, in Addis Ababa's military museum, naval uniforms and ship models stand as poignant reminders of the country's maritime past. Serbia's story is equally compelling. When Montenegro declared independence in 2006, Serbia lost its access to the Adriatic Sea. The psychological impact was particularly significant because Serbia's maritime traditions dated back to medieval times. In Belgrade, you can still find maritime-themed restaurants that were established when the city was the capital of a country with a coastline. These establishments now serve as nostalgic reminders of a maritime heritage that exists only in memory. Local sailors who once operated vessels on the Adriatic have adapted their skills to river navigation, creating what they call inland admirals on the Danube. Bolivia's loss of its Pacific coast to Chile in the War of the Pacific, 1879 to 1884, perhaps best exemplifies the lasting trauma of losing sea access. The country maintains a fully operational navy that trains on Lake Titicaca, South America's largest lake. Every year on March 23, Bolivia observes the Day of the Sea, Dia del Mar, where schoolchildren nationwide sing songs about the ocean and Navy cadets parade through the streets of La Paz, 11,942 feet above sea level. The presidential palace even maintains a room with a view of the Pacific Ocean. Except the view is a mural, serving as a constant reminder of what was lost. Modern examples continue to emerge. South Sudan, upon gaining independence in 2011, became the world's newest landlocked nation. The separation from Sudan meant losing access to Port Sudan on the Red Sea. This new reality has forced South Sudan to develop what it calls dry port diplomacy, negotiating access routes through multiple neighboring countries while building its economy from scratch. The human stories behind these transitions are particularly touching. In Montenegro's coastal city of Bar, there are still Serbian families who maintained summer homes there for generations but suddenly found themselves foreign tourists in what was once their own country. Some elderly residents still speak of the Yugoslav Riviera with a sense of loss, remembering when the entire coastline was part of one nation. In Armenia, the loss of sea access dates back to ancient times, but the cultural memory remains strong. Armenian churches often feature boat motifs in their architecture, a reminder of when Armenian kingdoms reached the Mediterranean. Today, Armenian wedding ceremonies still sometimes include a ritual where the couple releases a miniature boat into a lake or river, symbolizing hopes for smooth sailing in life, a maritime tradition preserved in a landlocked present. 9. The Mountain Kingdom Effect, turning geographic constraints into advantages. A fascinating pattern emerges when studying landlocked nations. Many have transformed their mountainous terrain from what might seem like another geographic challenge into a unique advantage. This phenomenon, which economists call the Mountain Kingdom Effect, shows how geographic constraints can become strategic assets. Switzerland stands as the prime example of this transformation. Rather than viewing its alpine location as an obstacle, Switzerland turned its mountains into a cornerstone of its national identity and economy. The Swiss developed the world's first mountain tourism industry, invented modern alpine sports, and even transformed their high-altitude pastures into the foundation of their famous dairy industry. Today, even Swiss banks market themselves using mountain imagery, associating alpine heights with financial security. But perhaps the most remarkable mountain adaptation comes from Bhutan, the tiny Himalayan kingdom that has leveraged its vertical geography to create unique economic opportunities. Bhutan's high-altitude organic farming initiative has created a niche market for mountain-grown products. Their red rice, grown at elevations above 8,000 feet, commands premium prices in international markets specifically because of its mountain origins. The country has even trademarked the term, "products of the Thunder Dragon," for its high-altitude goods. Nepal offers another fascinating example of mountain adaptation. Unable to compete with mass-produced goods from larger nations, Nepal has developed what it calls vertical manufacturing, specialized industries that actually benefit from high altitude. For instance, Nepali papermakers use local altitude-adapted plants to create unique handmade paper that's now used in luxury packaging worldwide. The country has even established high-altitude medicinal herb farms that capitalize on the unique growing conditions of the Himalayas. In the heart of South America, Bolivia has turned its high-altitude capital, La Paz, into an unlikely sports training destination. The city's location at nearly 12,000 feet above sea level has attracted international athletes seeking high-altitude training benefits. Local entrepreneurs have developed an entire industry around this, creating what they call mountain sports tourism. One local gymnasium even advertises itself as the highest boxing ring in the world, where athletes literally train in the clouds. Lesotho, completely surrounded by South Africa, markets itself as the kingdom in the sky. The country has developed what it calls highland water diplomacy, using its mountainous position as the source of much of southern Africa's water to gain political and economic leverage. Lesotho's water transfer program to South Africa has become one of its primary sources of foreign income, proving that being up high when everyone else is down low can be a powerful advantage. The cultural adaptations are equally fascinating. In Andorra, wedged high in the Pyrenees between France and Spain, local architects have developed what they call vertical vernacular, building styles that not only accommodate mountain terrain but celebrate it. Traditional Andorran homes are built into hillsides in ways that create natural temperature regulation, and modern architects continue this tradition with contemporary designs that have made Andorran mountain architecture a subject of international study. Even in urban settings, the Mountain Kingdom effect creates unique opportunities. In the Georgian capital of Tbilisi, entrepreneurs have developed mountain urban farming, using the city's steep hillsides to create vertical vineyards that produce unique, urban mountain wines. These wines command premium prices precisely because of their unusual growing conditions, turning what might seem like difficult terrain into a marketing advantage. The Mountain Kingdom effect extends to education as well. Landlocked mountain nations have developed specialized knowledge in areas like avalanche control, high-altitude construction, and mountain ecology. Switzerland's mountain research institutes are now global leaders in climate science, while Nepal's high-altitude medical facilities have become centers for studying altitude-related health issues. 10. Modern solutions. How technology and trade are changing the game. The digital revolution and emerging technologies are dramatically reshaping what it means to be landlocked in the 21st century. From virtual ports to digital corridors, landlocked nations are leveraging technology to overcome their geographic constraints in ways that would have seemed like science fiction just a few decades ago. Rwanda, often called the digital heart of Africa, provides a compelling example of this transformation. Despite being landlocked and relatively small, Rwanda has positioned itself as a technology hub by developing what it calls digital ports. The country has established a nationwide 4G network and is implementing 5G technology, allowing it to export digital services and become a leader in areas like mobile banking and digital healthcare. The capital, Kigali, now hosts data centers that serve much of East Africa, effectively creating data ports that don't require physical access to the sea. Mongolia has pioneered what it calls virtual transit corridors. Using blockchain technology, the country has created a digital tracking system that allows goods to move through China and Russia with minimal physical inspection. Every container is equipped with smart sensors that monitor location, temperature, and tampering attempts in real time. This system has reduced transit times by up to 40% and created a new profession of digital transit managers, who monitor shipments from control centers in Ulaanbaatar. Perhaps the most innovative approach comes from Azerbaijan, which has developed digital Silk Roads, virtual business zones that allow companies to operate in a special economic zone without physical presence. These zones have attracted technology companies and digital nomads, creating what local entrepreneurs call bandwidth ports that rival traditional seaports in economic importance. In Uganda, a fascinating initiative called Skybridge uses drones for cross-border trade. The country has established networks of drone corridors for delivering high-value, low-weight products like medical supplies and electronic components. Local operators have become experts in what they call aerial logistics, managing fleets of drones that operate independently of traditional land routes. Laos has transformed its landlocked status into an advantage in the digital age by becoming a major player in cryptocurrency mining. The country's abundant hydroelectric power, generated by its numerous rivers, has attracted cryptocurrency operations that were previously located in coastal areas. Local technicians speak of mining the digital sea, creating wealth not from ocean resources but from the virtual world. The human stories behind this technological transformation are equally compelling. In Botswana, young entrepreneurs have created digital caravans, mobile technology hubs that travel around the country teaching digital skills. These modern caravans, equipped with satellite internet and solar power, are creating a new generation of tech-savvy entrepreneurs who see being landlocked not as a limitation but as an opportunity to focus on digital commerce. Luxembourg, already a financial center, has leveraged its landlocked position to become a leader in space technology and satellite communications. The country has even passed laws claiming ownership of minerals mined from asteroids, looking to the stars rather than the seas for its future resource needs. Local students now study space logistics, alongside traditional subjects, preparing for a future where physical borders matter less than orbital paths. Chad has developed an innovative solution called Market Match, a mobile app that connects landlocked farmers directly with coastal markets, eliminating multiple layers of middlemen. The app uses artificial intelligence to predict market demands and optimize transport routes, turning smartphones into powerful tools for overcoming geographic isolation. These technological solutions are creating new cultural phenomena as well. In the Uzbek city of Tashkent, digital port cafes have emerged where entrepreneurs gather to manage their online businesses, creating virtual connections to global markets that bypass traditional trade routes entirely. These cafes have developed their own unique culture, blending traditional Central Asian hospitality with modern digital entrepreneurship. 11. The psychology of landlocked nations, cultural and social impacts. The psychological impact of being landlocked extends far beyond economics, creating unique cultural characteristics and social behaviors that psychologists have begun calling landlocked mentality. This fascinating phenomenon shapes everything from national identity to individual aspirations in ways that are only now being fully understood. In Austria, researchers have identified what they call mountain-sea synthesis, a cultural adaptation where people create elaborate indoor pool complexes that combine alpine and maritime elements. The famous Alpentherm in Bad Hofgastein features saltwater pools with mountain views, allowing visitors to experience a symbolic connection between mountain and sea. Local architects speak of designing spaces that bring the ocean to the Alps, helping satisfy what they describe as an innate human desire for connection to the sea. Paraguay offers a particularly interesting case study in landlocked psychology. The country has developed what sociologists call river consciousness, a cultural adaptation where rivers take on many of the symbolic and practical roles that the ocean typically plays in coastal societies. The Paraguay River is often referred to as our sea in local poetry and literature. Children's books feature river dolphins instead of ocean dolphins, and local mythology has developed unique water spirits that combine river and ocean characteristics. The phenomenon of horizon hunger, a term coined by Mongolian writer Menduyo Gambojov, describes the psychological need for vast, open spaces that many landlocked peoples experience. In Mongolia, this has led to the development of sky-watching culture, where people gather on the steppes to observe the endless horizon and star-filled skies, finding in the heavens the same sense of infinity that others find in the ocean. In Burkina Faso, an intriguing cultural adaptation has emerged called desert sailing. Local artists and designers create land yachts, wind-powered vehicles that sail across the desert plains. These vessels, combining traditional sailing techniques with desert transportation, have become both a practical means of transport and a symbolic connection to maritime culture. Annual desert regattas attract participants from across the region, creating what participants describe as an inland sailors community. The impact on education systems is particularly fascinating. In Czech schools, maritime education is integrated into the curriculum in unique ways. Students learn about ocean ecology and maritime navigation despite being hundreds of miles from the sea. One Prague school principal explains, "We teach our children to think globally, even if we're landlocked locally." The result is a generation of what some call philosophical sailors, young people with a deep understanding of maritime matters despite limited direct experience. Nepal has developed what psychologists term vertical compensation, using height as a substitute for maritime reach. This manifests in architecture, where buildings often incorporate elements traditionally found in coastal areas, such as observation decks and panoramic windows, but oriented toward mountain views instead of seascapes. Local architects speak of building lighthouses in the mountains, creating structures that serve as symbolic connections to distant oceans. In Malawi, researchers have documented what they call lake-sea transference, where Lake Malawi takes on many of the cultural and psychological roles that the ocean typically plays in coastal societies. Local communities have developed elaborate fishing traditions that mirror maritime customs, and lakeside communities speak of the lake using oceanographic terms. Children grow up learning lake wisdom that parallels maritime folklore in coastal nations. The impact on language is equally profound. Linguists have noted that landlocked nations often maintain rich maritime vocabularies, even when direct contact with the sea is limited. In Hungarian, for example, numerous nautical metaphors remain in common use, reflecting the nation's historical connection to the sea through the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Phrases like, "we're all in the same boat," take on added poignancy in a landlocked context. 12. Food security and maritime resources. How landlocked nations adapt. The challenge of securing seafood and maritime resources without direct ocean access has led to some of the most innovative and surprising adaptations in landlocked nations. From high-tech fish farms in the mountains to traditional preservation techniques, these countries have developed fascinating solutions to maintain their connection to marine cuisine and resources. Hungary's solution to this challenge is particularly innovative. The country has developed what it calls precision fish farming, a network of geothermally heated ponds that produce tropical fish species in the middle of Central Europe. In the town of Zarvas, the Research Institute for Fisheries and Aquaculture has created what locals call the Hungarian Sea Farm, where saltwater fish are raised in artificial marine environments. The facility even breeds species of coral, supplying aquariums throughout Europe. In Laos, traditional fish preservation techniques have evolved into a modern industry. The country's famous River to Table program combines ancient fermentation methods with modern food science to create fish products that can compete with coastal nations' fresh seafood. The fermented fish sauce, padak, has become so renowned that coastal nations now import it, creating what local producers call reverse maritime trade, landlocked nations supplying coastal ones with fish products. Switzerland has taken an entirely different approach with its Alpine Aquaculture initiative. In the mountain town of Lostallo, entrepreneurs have converted an old military bunker into a sustainable fish farm. The facility uses mountain spring water and hydroelectric power to raise Mediterranean sea bass at 3,000 feet above sea level. Local chefs have developed what they call Alpine Mediterranean fusion cuisine, combining mountain and maritime flavors in unique ways. Perhaps the most ambitious project comes from Mongolia, where scientists have created desert fish farms in the Gobi Desert. Using advanced water recycling systems and solar power, these facilities raise both freshwater and marine species in one of the world's most unlikely locations. The project has spawned a new profession of desert marine biologists, who specialize in maintaining artificial marine environments in extreme conditions. Kazakhstan's approach to the caviar trade demonstrates another creative solution. Unable to access traditional sturgeon fishing grounds in the open ocean, the country has developed sophisticated breeding programs in the Caspian Sea and inland waters. Kazakh caviar producers have even created a new category they call mountain caviar, sturgeon roe from fish raised in high-altitude lakes, which they claim has a unique flavor profile due to the mineral content of mountain water. Uganda has transformed its portion of Lake Victoria into what locals call Africa's inland fishery. The country has developed sophisticated processing facilities that prepare freshwater fish to compete with maritime products in international markets. Nile perch from Lake Victoria is now exported globally, processed in ways that make it competitive with ocean-caught fish. Local processors have become experts in what they call lake-to-world logistics, managing complex cold chains that connect landlocked fisheries to global markets. The human stories behind these adaptations are equally fascinating. In Czech Republic's South Bohemian region, families maintain centuries-old traditions of pond fishing, with some ponds dating back to the 16th century. These families have developed unique techniques for raising carp, a freshwater fish that has become synonymous with Czech Christmas celebrations. The tradition has created what locals call pond dynasties, families who have maintained the same fish ponds for generations, developing detailed knowledge of artificial ecosystem management. In Bolivia, high-altitude communities have developed vertical fishing techniques in mountain lakes, using methods adapted from both Andean traditional knowledge and modern aquaculture. Local fishermen have become experts in what they call thin air fishing, adjusting their techniques to account for the effects of high altitude on both fish behavior and human performance. 13. The future. New opportunities and challenges for landlocked nations. As we move deeper into the 21st century, landlocked nations are facing both unprecedented opportunities and novel challenges. Climate change, technological advancement, and shifting global trade patterns are creating a new landscape that could fundamentally alter what it means to be landlocked. In Rwanda, scientists are developing what they call vertical oceans, multi-story aquaculture facilities that combine hydroponics with fish farming. These urban food production centers are designed to provide coastal resources without coastal access. The capital city, Kigali, now hosts what locals call sky farms, buildings where fish swim in tanks stacked 20 stories high, powered by renewable energy and managed by artificial intelligence. Climate change is creating unexpected opportunities for some landlocked nations. As Arctic ice melts, Mongolia is positioning itself as a future transit hub for northern shipping routes. The country is already developing what it calls Arctic-ready logistics, specialized systems for handling cargo that might soon travel from Chinese factories to European markets via Russia's northern coast. Mongolian universities have even begun offering degrees in Arctic corridor management, preparing for a future where the shortest path to the sea might be northward. Azerbaijan has launched what it calls digital ports of tomorrow, virtual trading hubs that use blockchain technology and artificial intelligence to manage complex international transactions without physical shipping infrastructure. In Baku, young entrepreneurs are developing trading platforms that they claim will make traditional ports obsolete for certain types of commerce, particularly in digital goods and services. The rise of 3D printing technology is creating another revolution in landlocked nations. In Botswana, makers are using advanced manufacturing to produce items that would traditionally require imports through complex supply chains. Local innovators speak of printing their way to self-sufficiency, reducing their dependence on maritime trade routes. One Gaborone-based company has even begun printing replacement parts for agricultural equipment, creating what they call a digital supply chain that bypasses traditional logistics entirely. Nepal is pioneering what it calls altitude advantage in the age of climate change. As rising temperatures affect lowland agriculture, Nepal's high-altitude farming regions are becoming more valuable. The country is developing specialized cold storage facilities in mountain areas, positioning itself as a natural refrigerator for the region. Local entrepreneurs speak of turning geographic constraints into climate resilience assets. Particularly fascinating is the emergence of virtual coastlines in landlocked countries. Using virtual and augmented reality technology, countries like Austria are creating immersive coastal experiences for tourism and education. In Vienna, a new facility called Ocean Lab allows visitors to walk on virtual beaches and explore marine environments through advanced simulation technology. Educators use these facilities to teach maritime science, creating what they call landlocked marine biologists. The human element of these changes is equally compelling. In Chad, young people are becoming digital nomads, using internet technology to provide services globally while remaining rooted in their landlocked home. They call themselves desert surfers, riding digital waves rather than ocean ones. Local tech hubs have emerged in unlikely places, with one entrepreneur describing their work as turning the Sahel into Silicon Valley. However, these opportunities come with new challenges. Cybersecurity becomes critical when digital infrastructure replaces physical ports. The need for reliable internet access becomes as crucial as traditional transit rights. Landlocked nations are developing new kinds of diplomatic relationships focused on digital rights and data transfer agreements rather than traditional transit protocols. Perhaps most intriguingly, some experts predict that being landlocked may actually become advantageous in certain scenarios. As sea levels rise and coastal areas face increasing challenges, the stable ground of inland nations might become more valuable. Some landlocked countries are already positioning themselves as future havens, developing infrastructure to accommodate potential climate migrants from coastal regions. In closing, the story of landlocked nations is not just about overcoming geographic limitations. It's about human ingenuity, adaptation, and the constant evolution of what it means to be connected in our changing world. From ancient trade routes to digital highways, from traditional preservation methods to vertical ocean farms, these nations continue to demonstrate that innovation often flourishes precisely where constraints seem most limiting. The future of landlocked nations may look very different from their past, but one thing remains constant: their ability to adapt, innovate, and transform perceived disadvantages into unique opportunities. As we face global challenges like climate change and technological disruption, the lessons learned by these nations about resilience and adaptation become increasingly valuable for all of us. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of landlocked nations. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring our fascinating world.